Kia ora and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with New Zealand artists. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkich. These conversations are intimate, uplifting and insightful. The guests on the show have absolutely enriched my life, and I'm sure their stories will have the same effect on you. Thank you so much for joining me to listen to these amazing people speak about what drives them, the way they work, and their personal takes on life. Hello and welcome back to the Creative Matters podcast. This week I'm speaking with Robyn Penn. Richard is a South African artist living and working in Auckland, Aotearoa. He works across various media, including painting, drawing, sculpture and animation, exploring the relationship between visual and conceptual abstraction. His work examines the intersection of scientific and artistic vision, using scale and detail as metaphoric devices to reflect on the invested positions of the viewer. More recently, Richard has worked exclusively with clay and ceramics, and in 2022 he was the recipient of the premier New Zealand Portage Ceramic Award. In this episode, we discuss his upcoming exhibition in May at Public Record, and we have a fascinating chat about his collaborative exhibition, which he's curating at Depot Artspace in October. We also talk about his journey from South Africa to New Zealand and how he has found his community here, what he gained from various residencies around the world, and how he pivoted to clay when he came to Aotearoa. And we meet the glorious Artu Peatoo, a collaborative persona between Richard and his wife Robyn Penn, who is also an artist. I think on the day that we recorded, it was rubbish day, so you might hear a few trucks in the background and a few birds. And the morning of our interview, a beautiful keraru flew straight into the studio and sat on my chair. So I feel like that was a good sign and a good omen for a great chat ahead, and it so was that. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Richard.
Hi, Mandy. Thanks for having me.
You are all the way from South Africa, and you've been in New Zealand since the end of 2020.
Yeah.
So welcome to New Zealand.
Thank you.
And how are you finding being here?
So far, so good. Really amazing. A completely beautiful country. Haven't had as much opportunity yet to travel, but that'll happen. I found myself immediately enmeshed in an incredible community, which is Auckland Studio Portage, which I kind of made the transition so much easier because I did a residency there almost immediately as I came back, and I'm still very much involved there, and it's just been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so nice to have that community already established to come to.
Yeah, especially when we didn't know anyone here. I think I've got one cousin here, and my wife Robyn, also an artist, has a cousin here, and we pretty much didn't know anyone else. We've got no galleries, no buyers, no one knows who we are, and we just, our son was going to do his last 2 years of school, and we were just in a brand new country during a pandemic. So I think it actually went incredibly smoothly, and I think 90% of that was because of the Potters community and being in a residency and having those people around me was amazing.
Yeah, and being able to connect with other artistic people.
Yeah.
And sort of make connections through their communities as well.
Yeah.
And so you came from South Africa in 2020 where you'd had a whole year of lockdown with the pandemic. And then you came to New Zealand and we were still kissing each other and not wearing masks, yes. Which would have been a shock.
Yes, I remember sitting the 2 weeks of MIQ in Auckland, in the middle of the city, was just wonderful. It was just so great because you could just to make that transition from the craziness of leaving a country and the craziness of settling in another country, to have 2 weeks where you could, we brought work and we worked during the day, but it was, people bring you food. We actually really, really enjoyed it, and we could just hang with one another for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But one of the weird things was sitting on the balcony, well, not on the balcony, but looking out the window and looking at the streets below and seeing all the people like just walking with one another, no masks. It was like La La Land, because in South Africa we'd been locked down for months and there were all sorts of strictures on our movements and masks and anxieties, and then suddenly we were in this place where the COVID hadn't hit yet. So
yeah, which is so strange, isn't it? Yeah, we were in a sort of little bubble of our own, I think, for quite some time.
Yeah, until it popped.
Yeah, that's right. So, Richard, it would be really nice to hear something about your childhood and your upbringing in South Africa, and then we can talk about a little bit later why you chose to come to New Zealand.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, where in South Africa were you actually born?
I was born in Johannesburg, and I've spent my entire life in Johannesburg. After I finished university and I met my future wife, we bought a flat, then we bought another flat, then we bought a house. But all of those properties that we've lived in was pretty much in a 5-kilometer radius of my house where I grew up in Orange Grove in Johannesburg. And I think that actually, skipping ahead to why we came to New Zealand, one of the reasons was I just realized I couldn't take myself seriously. I'm 46 years old. I can't have lived within a 5-kilometer radius of where I grew up. So I moved to a place that was the furthest away that I could possibly be.
Is that right? Wow.
Well, I think, it was circumstances where that New Zealand was the only place we could actually go to, because my wife and my children have citizenship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so because no other country would take 2 artists.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's like being self-employed. It's so hard to prove your financial worth.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is hard. So is Robyn a New Zealander?
Yeah, she's
born in New Zealand.
She took citizenship when she studied here. She studied here at ILM in the 90s, and she took citizenship then.
That's
and
right.
Then,
yeah. So she came when she was about 18, was it?
Something like that. Yeah.
That's right. I remember her saying. Yeah. So Robyn works for Creative Matters as an art educator, which is amazing for us, and. I guess that's how we kind of made the connection at the beginning, maybe. Possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
So what sort of child were you, and were you discovering or had you discovered your creativity young?
No, the one memory that always sticks out in my mind, so my brother was a couple of years older than me, and I think he was always the golden child. He was exceptionally academically really well at sports, although I was better than him at that.
Good.
That was one thing. And I remember the one. It was when I don't know how old I was, but some conversations just stick in your brain. And our headmaster of Norwood Primary School, Mr. Lever. For some reason, I was standing there with my mother, and Mr. Lever was talking about how amazing Anthony has done. And Anthony, my brother, also had leukemia, so he recovered very well from that, and he's now a pediatric oncologist in the UK. So, the headmaster, Mr. Lever, was talking about how well he's done and everything, and then he looked at me and he said, "And Richard, you're a late bloomer." So I have memories. I remember my uncle was a painter, an abstract painter, and my father is a photographer and was a musician. And my father would always have a medieval band that he played, and they would come and do rehearsals in our lounge. And I would sit on the couch and listen to hurdy-gurdies and viols and violas and all sorts of other instruments that you just never get to hear. Strange sounds, and I would always, there was a big purple painting of my uncle's, Lionel Abrams, behind the couch, and I would often sit and look with the painting right up against my nose, and I would look at the weave of the painting, of the canvas, and you could see how he'd obviously used glazes, and the paint would pool in between the weaves in that little indentations, and I just couldn't understand how he could do that. How could he get the paint in there? And I think that close looking with that canvas right up against my nose was something that when I started drawing, I work in the most minute. I used tiny dots or lines made with a 0.16 millimeter pen, and there's very much a sense of having to get right up close and then be able to move further back and watch and see the difference. You know? What did happen was I found out I was very bad at maths and science. And at my last year of school, my matric year, we call it the last year of school, I dropped science and I took up art, almost on a whim. Well, I mean, I had to drop science because I was going to fail the year, and then it was just no looking back from that point onwards. That's all I wanted to do with my life. Really? And weirdly enough, at university, I started doing a lot of reading about science, even though because what you do at school in science is all maths, and the magic of science is lost in the teaching of science in schools. And when you read books about science and people who can communicate the magic of science, then it's like reading a fantasy book. It's incredible.
Yeah. So you can obviously see the connection with science through your art practice now. So what were you actually studying at university?
At university, I studied fine arts.
Oh, it was fine arts.
Yeah, I did do. Yeah. I did fine arts at university.
How great that you discovered your artistic side a little bit later, but, So did you have that in your mind that you wanted to study and then you wanted to become an artist? That was your goal?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't think much about what it meant to be an artist, what kind of problems it would create in your life, and the fact that there were no blocks available that you could tick when you go into a bank, or if you you apply for something or anything, and people have no idea how you live your life with the kind of money that you do and don't earn. I just decided that's what I wanted to do, and so I did. Yeah.
And you've spent your whole life as a full-time artist.
I did do I did a 6-year stint at AFTA, which is the South African Film School. So I was the head of animation there and vice principal of learning, and I was quite involved there for a long time, for 6 years. And then when at the 2008-2009 bank crash recession that happened, that was when everyone was holding on to their jobs. That's when I resigned from AFTA and decided to become an artist. It's just a matter of, you just got to get involved. You just got to put, you've got to enter those competitions. You get rejected from some of them, you get onto some of them. Hopefully you maybe win an award, and whatever that award is, if it happens, but you just got to be doing stuff.
Yeah. So for somebody who had, a very, like we said, a varied art practice, I guess coming into clay and ceramics wasn't that unusual for you to bring in another part of your practice. So how did you actually start with that kind of work in New Zealand? And it'd be great also to hear about your residency in Auckland Studio Potters, but also at the Driving Creek Railway
and Potteries.
Yes, that one.
Okay, so so I've been drawing and painting and making prints for my whole kind of career, and I think it was in about 2018 I made these little bronze sculptures, and then decided that what would really work nicely as a plinth for them, small little plinth, would be a ceramic plinth. So I went to someone I knew who was teaching pottery just a block away from me where I was living in Johannesburg, and she her name is Caroline Schultz Vieira, and she taught me how to roll slabs and how to join them. And so that's where I started. That's the kind of teaching I had. And then, that's the thing about clay, is that once you start, and anyone will tell you this, and you start with clay and it completely seduces you. There's just something so seductive about mud. And that completely, and I actually never made those, landed up never making those plinths. I just couldn't, because, but rolling slabs and working with slabs was how I started off making sculptures, and I just kept on growing from there. Then I got to New Zealand and I applied for the Auckland Studio Potters residency, which was meant to be a 3-month residency, but because of COVID, no one was coming in. No one wanted to do a residency, and no one was coming in from outside because the borders were shut. So I ended up staying there for about 9 months, and which is amazing because I wouldn't have had a studio otherwise, because we were living in.
And so what was your work actually like at that point, or at the beginning, and has it evolved over this time?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot. I would say the work I was making, and even at Auckland Studio Potters, were these kind of very strange, familiar yet not familiar machine parts, cogs, and things that you just look like they would slot into a larger machine. But they were quite solid, and they were quite weathered, as if they'd been buried underground. But they were also quite kind of science fiction-y in a way. I like the idea of them being from a future civilization and then having been buried underground and traveled back in time, and being, and having been weathered underground, and then we get them here. That went very well at Auckland Studio Potters, and I took those ideas to as far as I could. And then I landed up at, I put a proposal through to Driving Creek Potteries for a residency there, just a 1-month residency. And I did that at the beginning of last year, 2022. And that's an amazing place, because it's Barry Brickell is an absolute legend. I mean, an absolute gem. And he built these. He was a potter and a railway fanatic, and he built the potteries, and then he built railways into the hills to go and collect his clay. And the railways have kind of grown, and the potteries have grown. And as they've grown, all the bits and pieces of the railways, that the cogs and things that have been left behind, and all sorts of rusted metal pieces have just been kind of left on the side of the railways. So it's like this. And then the pottery, everyone who comes to Driving Creek often leaves pieces of pottery, and Barry, kind of created all these little gatherings of monsters and half people and characters along the pottery, along the railway up into the mountains. It's like a phantasmagoria of abandoned pottery and rusted machinery. It's just absolutely incredible.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I picked up a cog that I'd found, a rusted cog, and I went up to the studio and I made that cog out of the Cora Gold clay. And then I kind of looked at and it was again one of these solid pieces, and I looked at it and I thought, what would happen if you strip it of, like, what's happening inside? Like, it looks solid, but maybe there's something else happening inside. So I started to strip away in a kind of incremental manner from one sculpture to the next. I'd strip away the external cladding of this cog. And at the same time, I'm looking at diatoms, which are the monocellular plankton that live in the ocean, that have a silica skeleton. And if you look at them under a microscope, if you look them up, you'll see how incredible these forms are. But they can look very much like cogs. So using that as diatoms as a kind of aesthetic lens, stripping that cog of its cladding and showing imaginary walls in between, and turning this incredibly solid machine part into something that was really quite ephemeral and fragile. That became the project that I worked on at Driving Creek, and that work formed the kind of core of the work that I entered into Portage, which won the Portage Award.
Oh, right. That came from that residency.
Yeah.
And the work that, the work for that Portage Award competition and show, it's got so many spaces within, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much sort of positive, negative going on, which is really beautiful. As you said, it has that sort of fragility about it. From that, in some ways, it's almost like you're breaking it down and creating spaces within. So how do you actually do that? What's your process?
Well, I think again, like firstly, that breaking that idea of looking into something, it always reminds me of sitting on the back of that couch and looking at my uncle's work and looking into the weave of the canvas, because there's just a sense the whole time I want things to get more complex and to increase the complexity and to be able to get really close and really far away and see something different. In terms of process, it's slabs. It's the only lessons I ever got in clay was how to roll the slab. So all the work I've done has been made out of slabs. The very solid pieces are thicker slabs that are laid on top of one another. And these more ephemeral ones are very thin slabs that are supported by walls, supported by slabs, which are just cut into smaller pieces that line up that stand up and support the slabs above it.
Right.
But it's interesting, you can't, when you're working with slabs, you've got to, they dry out really quickly. So you've got to monitor the dampness of the clay. So often what I would have to do is plan it out very carefully, know how many levels I need to make, how many slabs I need to make, sometimes up to, 15 slabs. And they're all cut out of templates. I have templates that I then use to cut the shapes out of. Then I have to store them in between plastic so that it's completely airtight so that they don't dry out. And I have to make all the walls as well and store them. And then at some point when I'm ready, when all the pieces have been made, I then go to ASP and spend a couple of days building directly onto a kiln shelf, because you can't lift it. You've got to be able to just lift up the kiln shelf and put it into the kiln. You can't lift the piece because it'll be too fragile. It'll just collapse and break. So a lot of planning, and each step of the way has to be thought out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I kind of thought maybe you started with like a big fat slab, like a big block of clay, and then kind of created the spaces.
Like carved into them.
Yeah.
No. It's all made with, it's all kind of modular. You're making every little wall, cutting it out, and every hole is punched individually, and every piece is made and then put together. But I mean, it's kind of it sounds very regimented, and in a way it is. But I also, there has to be some space, some room left for gravity and the kind of violence of the kiln and the heat to have its own effect. Because if these things are meant to look like they've been impacted on by natural elements and acids in the soil, and them, and they've been and time, then the closest thing I have to that, you can't always create that just through your own craft. You've got to, and when you've got something like a kiln waiting there, which is going to be fired up to 1,300 degrees, then use that as a tool, So sometimes I would specifically leave walls out so that I know that I hope that there'll be slumping in that area, or there'll be a cracking, but it must be a good crack. It must be a crack that tells a story, that is a narrative crack, that isn't just badly made and you can tell. It must look as if there's a story attached to it, like it's been impacted on by a shifting soil or something like that.
And then also just a glimpse into the actual process, which is kind of nice as well.
Totally.
Yeah. And are you actually fascinated by machines? Is there some connection with that as well, or is it not quite like that?
Yes, there is, but it's not like Barry Brickell, who has a fascination with trains and can actually build a train because he understands all the like how it works. I'm far more on the science fiction side, where I have no idea how these things work, but I like the idea that they're part of some greater plan, some greater piece of machinery that has some kind of function, but that it must resist clarity. It must resist being able to be understood, because otherwise then it just loses its power. Yeah.
And looking at your the works that you submitted for that award, I mean, they kind of look rusty, don't they?
Yeah.
And so that's the clay that you've used from the Coromandel, or is that clay from somewhere else?
So the thing is, the clay from the Coromandel, it's straight out the ground, and it doesn't have any of the additives that a commercial clay will have, and those additives allow it to become a lot more plastic, a lot more elastic.
Yeah.
So what happens when I tried to make these kind of things out of the Corogold clay, I would roll out a slab, cut it out, and the next morning it would be literally crumbled into 100 different pieces. It's just not good for that kind of building. It's great on a wheel and great for coiling, but terrible for slabs. So I landed up making the actual pieces out of commercial, like a brown-red commercial clay, but I made a slip out of the Corogold clay. So I would roll out all the slabs, cut them out in their templates, and then when they're ready to be built, before I actually place them on top of one another, I have to paint on this Corogold slip that I've made and then put it on. So that gives, that's what gives it its rusted feel. So it is the Corogold clay that does it, but underneath it is a commercial clay.
Which is beautiful. And it's a lovely idea of sort of connecting. You're using that clay from that place to connect your work, but it's also connecting with place. And
absolutely.
Yeah, which is lovely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes you do use glazes, don't you?
Yeah. The glaze that I've used a couple of glazes here. The one that I love the most is this glaze. It's almost like a slip. It doesn't have a lot of silica in it, so it doesn't melt. It hardly melts. So when you spray it on, the little droplets from the spray, which in a normal glaze will just melt away and become a clear glassy kind of finish, it stays matte and it stays with that sandpapery texture, which is what I love as well, because it gives it that industrial feel. So that's the main.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Are you quite an experimental maker? Have you kind of seen this as a way to just experiment with materials and shape and that kind of thing and develop it, or do you think you're trying to achieve something that you've already figured out at the beginning?
Okay, so I think I am experimental in what I do, but I'm a slow experimenter. So I think that a lot of the work that I think that if I'd asked advice on whether I could make the things that I made, people might have said, like experienced potters might have said, oh no, that'll crack. So I think I've got that advantage of not having anyone to say, don't do that, or this is not the way that it's done. So I can just go ahead and make it. And if it does crack, I can try and figure my way around it. And especially, but it really does inform my teaching, because when I teach clay and clay building, it's all about making. I don't ever tell people that's not going to work, because you need to know that you need to be able to see it not work, and you need to be able to see it crack in order to find out why it cracked. To be stopped before you make the mistakes is often not very helpful. So that's a major part of my teaching philosophy is build it, learn from building, learn from making, learn from failing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where you make the most discoveries in some ways, isn't it? When you do something that doesn't quite work out, then you've got to kind of figure out the modifications that are needed and where you're going to take that from there. And
absolutely,
it's a valuable part of the process.
Yeah, no, essential. Yeah.
And just something about the residencies. I don't really know that much about how one would get a residency somewhere. So it's interesting that you actually managed to get a residency at a clay making studio without sort of 20 years of experience. So how do you find out about the residencies, and how do you apply? And then how do they actually choose the people that they want to be part of it?
Okay, it's a great question, but it's not a question that has one answer, because every residency will be different. So most of them, most residencies you can find online, and you just search for clay residencies New Zealand, and a whole lot of them will come up. You could probably go to Ceramics NZ, and there'd probably be lists there, or the Big Idea does a lot of advertising for residencies, and all of them will have a proposal call for applications, and in that call for applications there'll be, what do you want to do on this project, on this residency, what do you propose to do? And there's a space there also for your CV and other images of your work, so that when a panel or a number of people from the organization look at that, because they've got hundreds or 50 or 10 applications to choose from, they can then choose and say, according to what we're wanting to achieve at this institution, we then choosing these people. And it could be that what they're more interested in is sculptural work, or maybe they actually want experienced potters. All of that should be outlined in the kind of call for, the call for applications. Yeah. And then some residencies will offer you just a studio. Some residencies will offer you studio and materials. Some residencies give you stipend. Some it's fully paid. Very few. But studio, ASP and Driving Creek, they've got places for you to stay. If you're a resident, they've got a little potter's village in Driving Creek, and you get your own little railway sleeper and shared bathrooms, and they've got a shared kitchen there. So you go down to Coromandel Town and buy your groceries and come up and you can cook there. And, it's amazing. ASP was more just you've got the pod, you've got the studio. And you can run classes for people on weekends, so you can make some money by doing classes. They're all these different places have different perks.
But there's so many elements to it.
Yeah,
and so great that you can have a place either to stay or to work in, or to teach in, or to show in, I guess.
Yes, a lot of them have exhibition spaces, and ASP loves to do, and I think it's very valuable to do artist talks. So you as a resident will, on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, people can come, people come to ASP and there's cheese and wine, and you talk about your work and who you are. And it just expands, it just broadens the community beyond the walls of the center. There's artists coming in from overseas. Someone who's just Sylvia's just left ASP, and she's from France, and we've got people from England and from Japan coming in, and
it's such a great environment.
Yeah,
really inspirational, I imagine.
Yeah, it's great.
So good. Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So you have this ceramic and clay practice at the moment. Can you see yourself sticking with that medium for quite some time, or do you think you might return to some of the other things that you were doing?
Well, it's not. I definitely have been doing. I'm always drawing. I go through periods where I'm just making ceramics, and that's really intensive. But then when I get to the end of an idea, I'll then draw, to maybe just give my mind a rest from thinking three-dimensionally. I can think differently and get my mind into a different space. I think I'll always be. I can't imagine I'll stop with ceramics. It's just the creativity, like I've noticed in myself, has been like, it's just been leaps and bounds, and there's just new ideas fizzing all the time. I think one of the problems is that I'm constantly, I'll do a body of work, and whereas many people might carry on with that body of work for years, I'm already moved on to something. It's because there's just so many sparks that with ceramics I've found. So I think it probably is my favorite medium.
Isn't it great that you found it?
Yeah.
And so what kind of work are you doing at the moment, and what kind of work can you see yourself doing in the future with your clay?
Well, at the moment, so one of the things about ceramics is going big, and there are so many technical issues about going big, because as you get bigger, like the way I could make these solid cogs in a specific process, but as I got to a particular size, there's almost like a threshold, and then it just cracks. And so there's something about my process that I have to change. So there's technical issues within the making. Then there's technical issues within the kilns. Like you need a really big kiln to go really big. And there's the European Ceramics Center in the Netherlands, EKWC. That is a place I want to go to, and because they've got those big trolley kilns and there's technicians around you who can help you. That's a residency I really want to get at some point when I'm ready to apply. That'll help me to get bigger. But now I have to find other ways of getting bigger. So I've started to. What was great about working at Elam is that I also have access to their welding facilities. And so I was able to make armatures that I can clad in ceramic plates that I'm making. So I've made a couple of wall pieces, which have got a steel kind of armature and then clad in ceramics. And now I'm like welding with actually the piece I'm working on now, which is kind of two school chairs that have been welded together into some weird form. Mike Donaldson from ASP. I mean, that's the thing. You meet amazing people. I phoned up Mike and I said, Mike, I don't have access to my welding facilities anymore. Would you perhaps maybe be able to, can you maybe help? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. How about tomorrow? It's like, so he came and helped me, and because he has the kind of welding facilities that I don't have and the skills that I don't have, and he welded it together for me and did all that work for me. And I'm now busy putting that together for my exhibition for at Public Record on 11th of May.
Oh, brilliant.
We can talk about that later.
Yes, you can tell us about that, and also your show that you're curating, I think, in October.
Yes, X is greater than 1.
Yes, yeah. Yes. I had to think about my maths symbols and think, what does that mean, that symbol? Greater than, less than? Yeah. Yes. We'll talk about that soon.
Okay.
So are you kind of working then for your next show and creating a body of work for that particular show? And is that sort of under the same sort of overarching theme or idea?
Yeah. Yes, I think, again, this show is going to have kind of work similar to the work I did for the Portage, and it's going to have this new wall pieces and cladding process that I'm busy with. It's definitely gone strange. There's come some very strange pieces that are coming out of this, and I'm very excited about it. I mean, I've got to sell work, but that clearly is not the reason I'm making stuff. Because if I was making stuff that I knew would sell, I would definitely not be making the stuff that I'm making.
Yeah.
They're pretty weird. It looks like some of the work I'm making now looks like a fungal invasion has taken over kind of familiar objects in the studio and changed them into something alien, but still familiar.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there'd be people who would be drawn to that kind of thing. And does it have an abstract feeling about it, do you think? Or sort of a combination of abstract and familiar?
Yes, definitely. There's abstraction, but that abstraction has its roots in the real world. And I think that for me, there must be that sense of familiarity, because it entices the audience to want to try and figure it out, but the work must always resist clarity. It must always resist being able to be worked out. So that play between the familiar and the abstract or the unfamiliar is very important.
I love the abstraction, or the sort of abstracted feel with your clay works that you have. They're really striking. So where does this journey to abstraction actually come from?
That's interesting, because so it started when in about my third year at university, I did a project where I took photographs of my father doing all these domestic things. So it was like 8 or 12 photographs of him putting on his shirt, or putting on his socks, or brushing his teeth, sitting down. And as I was looking at these images, and I took these images with very outdated 3200 ISO film, and had very, very thick, very, very grainy silver halide particles. It was outdated and quite damaged. And so it was very grainy. And it kind of, as I was looking at these images, I suddenly they reminded me of my grandfather. We're a Jewish family, and my grandfather was very religious, and I would remember watching him in his house in Yeovil, and I would be watching him from the lounge, and I'd be watching through the dining room into the entrance hall, and he would be davening, which is a kind of when you pray as a Jew, and there's this kind of movement from the hips, this back and forward swaying from the hips, called davening. And there was this kind of gesture that I noticed there that I suddenly saw when I was looking at my father doing all these very domestic things. And I was really kind of interested in this inherited gesture that gets passed down through the genes. And so what I then started to do was look at these photographs, and my dad's a photographer, so I could then go into the dark room, and I could enlarge these photographs, and trying to distill that gesture, that inherited gesture, that tilt of the head, or that slightly raised one shoulder above the other, something that was just this thing that was, of course, impossible to isolate. It's ephemeral. But as I would go closer and closer, and I would make more photographs and more photographs, eventually, after years, I was suddenly looking at a field of dots, of halide particles, and it was just the grain of the film. But it struck me that as I was looking for this very, very personal, intimate, genetic, human thing, I was suddenly looking at the cosmos, because it just looked like a starscape of these grains. And that then I began to, and that was my movement into abstraction, because then suddenly a field of dots on a page had this other kind of significance. And that field of dots, I was doing my master's, and I looked deeper into, because this field of dots also looked like static snow, that when you've got no signal on your television and you've got the snow. And I realized, I found out that on a not a digital television, but on an analog television, which we don't have anymore, but the analog signal for snow is actually made up of something like 2/3 or 1/3 of that signal is made up from residual background radiation from the Big Bang. So it was so funny to me. It was so profound to me, actually, that when you were looking between channels, when nothing is tuned in, when you're looking at static snow on an analog TV, you say nothing's on, nothing's tuned, but you're actually watching the birth of the universe, And so I started looking at, and I was doing a lot of reading up into science and physics and quantum physics, and the very large and the very small, the very distant, and a lot of the images that we get from Hubble Space Telescope, for example. If you had to look up now the pillars of creation, you'll find that was taken by Hubble. You'll find a kind of shape, a format that looks almost like a stealth bomber, because what Hubble had to do, and what a lot of these images, how they're made, is they're made by taking lots of different images and then knitting them together, and you get these kind of quite strange shapes. And that specific one on the pillars of creation is a format that I've been using for a lot of the work, like the one wall work that I've got coming up for my next show is in that same format. So even though you look at the work, it'll be abstract. It's these plates of black ceramic with with dots and weird kind of melted parts on it. It looks abstract, but it's actually in the it because of the format, it carries the meaning of those images of deep space. So that's what I mean, is that it's nothing is completely abstract. There's something in it that is from the real world, and it is from that trajectory from looking at my father, going into the grain, finding the cosmos, looking further into how we image the cosmos, finding those formats, using them again and again, and embedding all of that information. It's quite hidden sometimes, but it's embedded there in the abstract forms.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a great story. And the drawing that you do has, lots of fine detail, as you said earlier, with the lines and dots and that kind of thing as well. So do you think that's kind of a natural progression that's come out of that stage?
Well, I would have to answer that by talking to specific works. So if I look at a series that I made last year, Mahoe series, which was looking at the Mahoe plant, I made 3 drawings, and they're quite big drawings. They're over 1 meter long and about 70 centimeters high. And the first drawing I did, and I used a very thin pen. I used the 0.16 millimeter pen, and I drew quite realistically. But even if you look at the image, there's areas where it kind of moves into abstraction. So I started off with a kind of realistic drawing, and then I moved on to what I call scan drawings. And because what I did first was I traced that, or elements of that same first drawing, onto another piece of paper that was the same size. And then what I did was I have this way of drawing where I use a very thin pen, and I go from top to bottom of the page on the very left, and I just do lines going down. And there's a rule for those lines. Those lines aren't allowed to touch one another. And when they do touch one another, you inevitably make a point, because when 2 lines touch, you make a point. So in order to define a form, that's when the line touches the line next to it. It's quite difficult to explain with words, and then what I do is I draw that drawing. That entire drawing is drawn top to bottom, left to right, 1 line at a time, with those rules in mind. And then I create this drawing, which is what I call a scan drawing. And then there's another drawing in the series of the same Mahoe plant, the same drawing, but done with different rules. Again, it's lines going top to bottom, left to right, but the rule is that the rule is that the lines can never touch, but I am allowed to lift my pen and put it down 2 millimeters after, with a 2 millimeter gap. So you can either create a point, a white dot almost, or you can, if those dots are in a similar position on the next line or the line before, you can actually get a white line to define the form. Again, very difficult to describe in words.
Very interesting. And what is it with the rules? Why rules?
Well, it's the scanning. It's this idea of our instruments that we have on Earth, that we can point them up to a planet that's however many 100,000s of light years away. In fact, distances that we will never, ever get to. We will never, ever get to a planet orbiting a star out there, and yet we can know that planet, we can know what elements are in the atmosphere of that planet because of the spectrometers and measuring instruments that we have created that have transcended our own frailties as human beings, our own ability to, we can know so much more through our instruments. So that I'm just fascinated by that our instruments can do this, and so I try to be one of those instruments when I draw those scan drawings, and because those rules are so specific, it feels like they are there for a reason. What are they capturing? Why are those rules there? That's the question you have to ask. I mean, that's what these spectrometers do. They do 1 or 2 things very, very well, and they give you very specific information, and they calibrate it in a specific way. So obviously, again, it's this idea of resisting clarity. My drawings, you can't. There's no real, you've got to look at them and go, there's so much effort has been gone into those drawings, and those rules are so specific. There must be a reason for it, because it's frustrating. It's like you don't know. There's so much that we can never know in the universe, and the universe is so big and so incredibly just so fascinating, and so much more than what we are. And we'll never get there. Well, we'll never get to those planets. We'll know something about those planets, but we'll never ever get there. So that's what those drawings are. They're kind of saying that there's something going on here. There's rules, there's intent, there's labor, but we don't know what it's actually doing.
That's fascinating. And then for that particular series, you use the Mahoe native tree foliage as your space to work within. Why did you choose that?
Well, I think that knowing your native bush is a way of situating yourself in a place and getting to understand that place. And I was very passionate about the South African bush. And when we made a garden, we did a lot of research and a lot of looking and into what the South African bush and what plants we would choose. And here in New Zealand, it goes back to being in the Coromandel, where I had a month on my own in the Coromandel at Driving Creek, and then for at least an hour after work, I could go into the bush. And I've got this amazing app called Seek, which you can point it at foliage and it'll tell you what that plant is. It'll give you the Maori name for it. And I just try to learn as much of the as much of the native bush as possible. And I just love it. I just feel like it helps me to understand. I like being able to walk through a place and be able to identify and know that those berries are eaten by kereru, or this is where the piwaka waka loves to, fly between,
Yeah.
It's a great way of
connecting.
Yeah.
Connecting with your new place.
Yeah.
But also, just getting to know it and becoming part of it, I guess. Yeah, which is lovely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then your foam series is more sort of open and you could say more abstract. Is that still thinking about the same ideas?
Well, that was me thinking. The foam series was, I was doing a lot of reading into quantum physics and what happens at the very, 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 like the smallest level of that things can go, because there's a particular length at which things can't get smaller, which is also kind of mind-blowing. You think that anything, you just chop it in half, it'll get smaller. But at the Planck length, it makes no sense to say chop it in half. There is no half. That is it. There's,
Yeah.
I think that just is quite weird. So there are ideas out there about quantum foam and the kind of underlying fabric of the universe at the extremely small that I was thinking about when I was doing them. Yeah.
And isn't it interesting? I'm finding it fascinating to hear you speak about your practice with so much reference to science. When, at high school, the boy who was doing science felt like he couldn't do it or wasn't interested in it, and that's what led you to take art.
Yeah.
And it's kind of still has that connection, doesn't it?
Totally. I mean, the magic of understanding the world and the magic of knowing how difficult it is to understand the world, and how we are almost as human beings not equipped to understand the world. At the very small and the very large, we are equipped to understand this very narrow band of like human-sized to cockroach-sized to mountain-sized things. But beyond that, we actually can't. We struggle to even understand. We can't even understand the suffering of people in other countries. It's just so. We just are equipped with such a specific and small, limited potential to, and then we've created. Then you have these amazing people who think beyond that and who can open up the very large and the very small, who create instruments that open up the very large and the very small. And it is so fascinating, and the distances and the speeds and things that we take for granted in our narrow band, when you're looking at what they actually mean in the universe. It's just fascinating. But you taught about that magical stuff at school.
No.
Well, I wasn't. Yeah.
That's great that you've discovered it.
Yeah. I think that what I do with all of the line that runs through all of that work is almost breaking down the marks to the smallest possible point. So in the drawings, there's a lot of dots. You can't get smaller than a dot. That's with the ink drawings. With the pastels, I use I usually cover the page in a pigment, and then I use a stencil, a line stencil. You get architectural stencils that are a line or a dot or something, and then I rub out, I erase. So I draw through erasure. And then with the paintings, I'm using tape, and I'm taping small. I cut the tape into like 3 millimeter lengths, widths, and then I put them on the page, onto the canvas, and apply paint to the whole canvas, and then constantly putting on tape, taking it off, painting. The paintings, I would say, are 90% putting on tape and taking tape off, and 10% actually painting.
Really?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting thing, because then you just build up this layers of tape and paint. It looks absolutely awful, and then as you unwrap it or take off the tape, this painting is revealed underneath. Beautiful. And this vibrant painting comes through. It's an amazing process. I
love that. And you don't leave any tape? It all comes off?
Not on purpose, yeah.
There might be the odd one left in there. So as part of your practice in the past, you have had that drawing and painting. And then you also have printmaking, where you're creating digital prints and monoprints and monotype. Monotype? What is monotype?
Monoprints are generally, hopefully I'm not getting this wrong. Monoprints are, if you take a piece of Perspex, for example, and you paint ink on it, and then you put a piece of paper over it and put it through the press, you'll get a one-off print, monoprint. Monotype is, for example, if, like what I've done before, I've cut 12 plates of lino cuts. I've done like 12 lino cuts, and then you use the same plates in different level and in different combinations to make completely different works that are only one-off works. They're still only one-off works, but they're made with the same plates as I'm using for the next work. So there'll be some similarity between them. And my understanding is that is a monotype.
Right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
There you go.
I hope it helps you in your future.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So your work is all very connected, isn't it? You have quite a lot of different media that you use and different techniques and, different aspects of your art practice. But would you say it's all connected around the ideas and the sort of use of shape and form?
I think that they look very disconnected. I think that the pastels look, if you put the pastels up and then you put the ink drawings up, they might very well look like they come from different artists. If you put the pastels and the paintings up, they also look like they come from different artists potentially. But that's, that through line of breaking something down and building it up out of the smallest possible increment.
Yeah.
And it actually goes back to animation, where you make, when I did animation at university, where you're breaking everything down to individual frames and increments. You're creating a movement frame by frame. A second is broken down into 12 individual drawings. Then I'm making dots, then I'm using tape, then I'm using stencils for the pastels. Even the way I make my sculptures, kind of breaking it down into the slabs and the walls and making it and then constructing it afterwards. So there's that technical aspect that's a through line, and an interest in science and in the ceramics, a kind of anthropological, archaeological uncovering that's important.
And you can really see that with your ceramic work in particular, but with all of them really, that there's a lot of layering of ideas, but layering of, media and which is really interesting. And that's, you can see why you kind of ended up working like that with your clay in some ways, because it's, even though it's a different process, it feels quite connected to the process that you had before.
Well, good. Yeah, that's... Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad it does feel that way. It feels that way to me. There's always
totally see that.
There's a constant. I'm constantly looking for more complexity, which kind of sometimes drives me mad and makes Robyn just roll her eyes because sometimes something quite simple could be beautiful. But I just always want to. I always want to make something more complex, add layers so you can see through, kind of like a palimpsest of process that just complexifies the form. That to me is interesting. And again, it all goes back to looking at that canvas on the back of the couch and seeing the weave of a canvas and how the paint pulls in every single dimple, and being interested in that.
Yeah, and a real interest in space, I think. You know, as I said earlier, that sort of positive and negative pull is quite evident throughout your work, I think. Yeah. Now, I'm dying to ask you about Artu Peatoo, which is the fictional collaborative problem child artist offspring of yourself and your wife. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I mean, that if you had to pull up some Artu Peatoo images, they're completely different to any of my work and any of Robyn's work. And Artu Peatoo was born on the aeroplane trip on the way back from New York. Robyn and I were both awarded the same fellowship to spend 6 weeks in New York just to take in New York and the art scene and just go to galleries.
Wow.
You know, it was just like amazing. Yeah. From an amazing man in South Africa who has a thing called the Ampersand Fellowship. And so we're totally inspiring there. And on the way back, we often spoke about how you often get pigeonholed into your brand as an artist, and it's very difficult sometimes to break out of it. And there's a lot of things that we're interested in that we just couldn't suddenly do. We couldn't suddenly make paintings, or we didn't feel like we could make paintings based on shunga erotic art, Japanese erotic art. So we decided we would create a new person to do all these things that we wanted to do, and we would collaborate on it. And so we brought about Artu Peatoo, and there's some rules in this collaboration. It's a rule-based collaboration. If I can remember all of them now, that'll be good. So the one rule is we never say who did what part of the collaboration, which means that I could make a work that's entirely without Robyn in it at all, but it's made under the persona of Artu Peatoo. We don't tell anyone that. Aspects of paintings, we paint on the canvas, and the canvas goes between studios. We don't ever say that was my part, that was his part, or that was whatever. We're not allowed to disclose that. Another rule is that we're allowed to ambush. We're allowed to ambush each other by taking work out of, like, I can take one of Robyn's paintings and she can take one of my drawings and turn it into an Artu Peatoo, which is quite dangerous. It's quite dangerous to make that rule. And one of the other rules is that we're not allowed to get upset. So we covered.
Yeah, brilliant. Especially a couple working together. It's good to have a few, put down a few rules to start with.
Exactly. And I think it's nice. It's nice to have that rule. We don't talk about Artu Peatoo, because Artu Peatoo isn't about talking and figuring out. It's about making and making decisions in that space rather than.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to have that freedom and that kind of that space that you can work within, that, you have your rules, but you're also breaking other rules.
Yeah, totally.
Which is great. I love that. Such a good idea.
It's been amazing. And we've made fountains, and we've made political work, and we've made erotic work, and we've made some work that looks very much like mine and Robyn's work. Well, one or two, the early ones, maybe one or two look like mine and Robyn's work together. But it kind of gets you out. It opens your mind to do anything you want.
Yeah, and it's a bit of fun too.
Total fun.
Yeah. And so, do you ever sell those works, and do you use that persona?
Yeah, when we first arrived in New Zealand, a very funny, actually strange story. But when we were in Johannesburg and we were talking about what would be a good place to find in New Zealand for our work as we're starting up. And I remember saying to Robyn, it'd be great to find a gallery / retail space that had ties with Japan. And we got out of MIQ and we parked on Williamson Avenue and we walked up to Ponsonby Road and we turned right. And the first shop that we went into was Public Record, which is owned by Yuka O'Shaughnessy, who is from Japan. And she has a retail space in the front with the best craft glassware ceramics I've ever seen. And really, for me, it's the best shop in New Zealand. And then, in Auckland, sorry, I haven't been very much further than that. And then it's got a gallery at the back. And we spoke to Yuka, showed her our work, and she said, come and have a show. And that show in July included Artu Peatoo. So it was a show for myself and Robyn and Artu Peatoo. So we've had an exhibition in New Zealand already of Artu Peatoo's work. And yes, we sell it, and we've got stock in our garage, and we can bring out Artu Peatoo whenever we want to. You know, we can start work as Artu Peatoo whenever we want to.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's almost like this sort of escape too. If you're kind of stuck on something in your own practice, you can kind of retreat to that place.
Yeah, absolutely.
To that child. Yeah. That naughty child.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, it's so good. It's brilliant. So we are getting along in time, Richard. So can we just very quickly talk about your exhibition coming up in May, and then also the exhibition at Depot Artspace?
Yes, so my exhibition in May, on the 11th of May, it opens at Public Record on Ponsonby Road. And it's an exhibition of ink drawings. It'll be at least one of the very large ink drawings I did during lockdown here in Auckland. So it'll be ink drawings, and it'll be ceramic work, the wall pieces, and a freestanding, strange creature that I've made, and as well as work similar to the ones I've done at for the Portage Award. And I'm really looking forward to that. I've been kind of in a creative frenzy for the last couple of months.
And you are also curating X is smaller than 1. Is that correct?
No, X is greater than 1.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. My mathematician brothers will not be impressed. Okay, X is greater than 1. So it's got the greater than sign in between those two symbols.
Yes.
Tell us about that show.
All right. Okay, so X is greater than 1 is a collaborative show. That's why X is greater than 1, because as long as the variable X is greater than one person, it's a collaboration.
Right.
There we go.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a number of things, actually. It's the exhibition will take place at Depot Artspace in Devonport in October. And the rules for being involved in it is that it has to be one of the collaborating team has to be from ASP, because it's an Auckland Studio Potters exhibition. But beyond that, I'm looking for, and of course I've got the space. I put through a proposal to Depot Artspace and they've granted me the space, which is amazing. But I've got zero work for it, because this year is the year that we're trying to get people to collaborate and make work for the exhibition, so that there'll be work to choose from. Now, one member has to be from ASP, but the other member doesn't have to be a ceramicist. So it can, in fact, it doesn't even have to be a ceramic piece at the end of the day. It can be a collaboration with a glass blower, with a weaver, with a electrician. I mean, with a dog. You could collaborate with a dog. It doesn't matter. I just want to see and I want to find interesting collaborations, because I love the idea of that process of collaborations and how you can collaborate in so many different ways. I've told you about mine and Artu Peatoo's collaboration is a rule-based collaboration, and you can get a kind of clear distinction of labor where one person makes the piece and the other person decorates it. You can have a call and response where two people make a little sculpture on Monday. On Tuesday, you swap the pieces of sculpture, and then on Tuesday you respond to the piece that you got the day before, and then Wednesday and Thursday you can, there's just so many ways. And if you follow me on Instagram or Auckland Studio Potters on Instagram, we'll be kind of peppering our social media with ideas for collaboration and how one collaborates. And then the idea is that you get in touch with me and we see where that collaboration goes. And then at the end of the year, there's the exhibition. Tied to that, but separate, are workshops that I'll be doing. So the Wednesday workshop at Auckland Studio Potters, I'll be taking people through creative development, because actually it's collaboration which sparks creative development. That's the focus of these workshops. And so that's a morning workshop. That's for ASP members. But I'm also going to be doing weekend workshops in June and July, where I'm looking for half to be ceramicists and half to be cross-disciplinary. So we're looking at, again, weavers, glass blowers, any kind of craft that you can imagine. And I'm going to get them together on 2 consecutive Sundays, and we're going to be doing collaborative things that will result in work, but hopefully also will spark relationships, which go further. And then people start working together for the exhibition, and we have more people working together and collaborating.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
There is a third aspect of it, collaboration, which is more of a community collaboration, which is a soup bowl drive. So we're going to be collecting soup bowls, and then we'll be selling them at the Auckland Studio Potters midwinter market, and they will be unnamed, all going for the same price. So there'll be bowls that will be made by very experienced potters whose work you really want to get, and they'll be selling for, I don't know, $20 or $30, and all that money will go towards cyclone relief. So it's a collaborative, community-based, another way of collaborating to help others that need it. And
that is such a great concept. All of those concepts are amazing, and what a great show that will be.
I think, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Great. And so if people are wanting, you said that they need to approach you. So do they approach you through Instagram, or what's the best way to get hold of you and come to you? Do you expect them to come with a proposal? Or?
Yeah, I expect. Look, I mean, I think that if, again, there needs to be one Auckland Studio Potter member in the group. So if you've got that,
by that do you mean in each piece that's been made, one of the makers needs to be from there?
Yeah, because it's an Auckland Studio Potters exhibition.
Yeah.
I'm on the committee of Auckland Studio Potters, and that's how we approach this, to engage the Auckland Studio Potters community, but also to expand it beyond those walls. So it's not just Auckland Studio Potters. There's other people, other craftspeople.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're working with if you know an Auckland Studio Potters member, and you must have spoken to them and figured out some way that you want to collaborate, then talk to me about it. You can contact me on Instagram. I'm on Richard Penn SA, which sounds like Richard Penser, but it's Richard Penn SA. That's probably the best way to get hold of me.
Yeah, and we'll have the link to your Instagram on your blog post.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that sounds incredible. I love that idea. And what if somebody loves it and wants to be involved but doesn't know anyone from ASP? Well,
that's the workshops. The workshops in June, July are for that. That otherwise join ASP. It's $90 for a year, and then you're in. And you can go to ASP. You can use the facilities. You can there's glazers available. You can use all the kilns. I mean, you pay for the kilns and you pay for the clay, but you've got all those facilities available to you.
Wow!
And you've got a studio to work in for certain times of the day when they're not classes. So $90 for a year doesn't seem too much to me.
No, that's very achievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Richard, it's time for the questions. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to your younger artistic self?
It's such a funny question, because I find myself in a position now when I am the younger self, because it implies that the person you're asking is in a position of success and it has achieved something, and then is talking and giving advice to a younger self. But now I find myself in a place where I'm like starting again. I am the younger self again. So I think you'd have to give me a couple of years to figure
we'll
out
come
how
back to you.
this country works and how the art world works here, and then maybe I can give myself some
True.
advice.
It's almost like you've reinvented yourself. And you are your younger self.
Yeah.
Artistically.
Yeah.
So good.
Because things like resilience and belief in yourself, I wouldn't be here at the age of 46 if I didn't have those things. I wouldn't still be making art and struggling through the weird financial times of an artist if I didn't have. So it's yeah.
And that sort of risk taking.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys have obviously done that quite a bit. You're like, yes, let's do this. Let's go there.
Yeah.
Which is great. Which are your favourite artists and why?
I think consistently, my uncle Lionel Abrams is one of my favourite artists, and R.B. Kitaj, or Kitai, I'm not sure how you pronounce his surname, is just unbelievable. You know, it does change from time to time, but and I know I've left out a few artists there. At the moment, like in New Zealand, Peter Hawkesby is incredible. Never fails to delight. And there's something so playful and so serious and so informal about his work, and yet so well put together and crafted and beautiful. And he's really making a statement that scale isn't everything, that you don't need to go massive in order to be successful and make beautiful work. He keeps his work quite small and doesn't want to go beyond that. I love his work. Robyn White, that exhibition she had at Auckland Gallery was unbelievable, especially her work with Pacific artists like Ruha Fifita. And there's another woman that she collaborates with, Tamari, but I'm afraid I can't pronounce her name. Just mind-blowing. And then you're struck by a massive piece that's just ink. That's just a big block of black ink. But again, there's just this sense of something going on underneath, like layers of something. But I could sit and look at those pieces. I think far more, those pieces, I've seen a couple of them, are far more moving than Rothko. I wasn't actually moved by Rothko half as much as sitting in front of those images from of Robyn White and her collaborators.
It's so beautiful, isn't it, her work?
Unbelievable.
And as an artist, what would you say is your biggest challenge?
Money. Finances. We have not had a moment of stability in our entire lives, which is quite something. But you learn to live with that because you wouldn't give up what you're doing. I wouldn't give up what I'm doing for anything. But it does impact on your life. You know, and it does. There are moments of incredibly high stress and anxiety, and it can be absolutely awful. But again, there's just nothing else that I would be doing.
And it's so amazing. I guess that makes it more of a challenge in a way that your wife is also an artist.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that unpredictability around the finances, being artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how great too that you have that support with each other and inspire each other, and then have little Artu Peatoo as well.
Yeah, that is something. I mean, I think most artists at least have one stable income in their relationship. That's the idea. That's the hope.
Yeah, very much
That's maybe
so.
a piece of advice I'd give to a younger person, but not really. I mean, you go where love takes you, and that's I wouldn't give it up, any of this up for.
And it must be so lovely to have that in common and to understand each other and what you're doing and how you want to live.
Yeah, and to be able to talk about these things, to be able to to be able to talk about art and about the things that you love and hate about it, and
that's right.
frustrations and the anxieties and the joys,
Yeah.
and to really know that the person is understanding exactly what you're talking about.
And it's probably not that common, is it, to have two artists in the family? I can think of a few, but
no, there's not many. There's not many that I know of. Although we had some good friends in South Africa who were from similar backgrounds. Yeah.
And what drives you to make the kind of work you make?
I don't really know how to describe what drives me to make it. It's just if I'm in the middle of a process that's working, I just have to get back to the studio. I just have to get back and be in that process. It's not even that I love doing it or that I enjoy it. It's not that on that level. It's like being in a state of mind. It's a necessity. It's that I need to be making it. And if it wasn't like that, if it wasn't a necessity, life is too hard as an artist. I wouldn't do it. But there's that necessity to be there making the work, and it provides the driving force.
That's great. All right, Richard, we need to put this to bed, this delightful podcast episode. I have really enjoyed talking with you and hearing about your practice. Thank you so very much for coming and for being a guest. And I wish you all the best with your exhibition coming up. And I'll definitely be coming to have a look. And also we'll be checking out your X is greater than 1, which I really love that concept. So, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mandy. I've never, it's been amazing. It kind of feels weird talking about myself for such a long time, but I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking about myself for such a long time. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.